Alrighty, so now we are up to Montreal in terms of their season preview. Last season, the Impact finished with a record of 12, 5, and 17 and had 41 points. They scored 47 goals, but they conceded 60 goals last season, which was one of the worst defensive record in MLS. And in fact, only FC Cincinnati had conceded more goals in the Eastern Conference than Montreal did last season, and they had a goal differential of minus 13. Now, last season summary, they did miss the playoffs, but they didn't miss it by much as they finished ninth in the Eastern Conference. I believe they missed it by a couple of points, which is kind of sums up the impact for the last couple of season where this is a team that it looked like they were going to potentially make the playoffs, but they just missed out in the last couple of season, and that's got to be very frustrating for Impact fan knowing the fact that their team is so close of making the playoffs, but either they collapse late in the season or the fact that they've been inconsistent is the reason why they weren't able to make it to the playoffs. But the good news is they did win the Canadian Championship, and they kind of caused an upset in the Canadian Championship this season because heading into this season, everybody knew that TFC was going to win it, and especially when TFC play against Montreal, a lot of people thought that TFC was going to beat Montreal in the Canadian Championship to go to CCL. Well, that did not happen. Montreal caused an upset and actually beat TFC on penalty in the second leg of the Canadian Championship, and because of that, they are going back to the CONCACAF Champions League, and it's going to be interesting to see how they will do once they go into that competition. Now, in terms of players that they got this offseason, they didn't really make a lot of acquisition during this offseason, but they did get Dynamo winger Romeo Kyoto, Joel Waterman, who is a player from the Canadian Premier League, and he's actually the first ever Canadian Premier League player to be acquired by an MLS team. So certainly congratulations to him to make a historic moment, not just for him, but also to the Canadian Premier League in general. Balatebla is another guy that is in for Montreal. Zachary Bergolet, who was on this team last season, but he was actually on loan with Lyon, and now this offseason they signed him on a permanent deal, so that's why he is also on the in list. And Steven Saba, who they just signed a couple of weeks ago. Now, player that is no longer with the Impact and players that either got transfer or got their option declined. Daniel Lovitz, who is now with Nashville. I believe they traded him during the offseason. Victor Cabrera, Thomas Millet Gorguen, Jason Bullet, Daniel Kinuba, Ken Korlicki, Jason Vargas, Bakri Asania are no longer on this team. And I also put Nacho Piatti on the out list, even though technically it's not official that Nacho Piatti is leaving the Impact, although there has been a lot of reports that Piatti is leaving the Impact. And I will also want to say that I know for most of the news of the week that I've done in the last couple of episodes, I haven't mentioned Nacho Piatti in the news of the week, and I'm pretty sure some of you probably would ask me have I not mentioned his name, and probably even leave in the comments below, you forgot to talk about the whole situation with Nacho Piatti at Montreal. Well, I didn't forget about that. The reason why I did not put in any of my news of the week is I thought these kind of reports of him going back to Argentina was going to be just like many reports that it's been linked with Piatti going back to Argentina. I mean, if you guys remember, before Montreal picked up Piatti contract heading into this season, there was a rumor that he was going back to Argentina, and it only took a couple of weeks before that rumor really fizzled out. Although this one, I will say this rumor is actually coming from a source in Argentina that is kind of like their main sports source. So this could definitely be a case where maybe Piatti would be leaving Montreal after all. But the reason why I haven't reported it, as I said, is that since I've heard so many rumor of Piatti going back to Argentina, and it hasn't really come true, I just feel like there's really no point of me kind of just bringing up this rumor again and just kind of say, well, here we go again. Nacho Piatti is linked to leave Montreal to go back to Argentina, and this is something we saw a couple of months ago, and we know that it's going to be not true. And until if there is an official source that tells that Piatti is leaving Montreal and go back to Argentina, that is when I'm going to actually mention his name in the news of the week, and I definitely would put it on there. And I might even be on the borderline of making a single video talk about Piatti going back to Argentina and leaving Montreal, because Piatti means a lot to this team, and that if Montreal does lose Piatti, that is a huge piece that they're going to miss. And in fact, most of the thing that I'm going to be talking about for the rest of this episode links with Piatti, whether or not if he's going to be leaving Montreal or staying with this club. Now, the goal scored for Montreal, I put a big question mark because, I would have put Piatti on there as the main goal scorer since he usually leads the team in terms of goal scoring until last season where he was out for majority of the year, and I think he still made top 5 in terms of goal scoring even though he was out for majority of the year. But really, besides Piatti, there is definitely a big question mark of who is going to be the goal scorer of this team. And then in some way, it's kind of like Montreal kind of have variety of players that could score goals for this team, but they're not really the main goal scorer. And these variety of players are with the likes of Urruti, Bojan, and Lappinainen, and even Okwanko, who all these guys could definitely score goals for them, but they don't emerge as a guy that will single-handedly be the main goal scorer and single-handedly be the guy that they rely on the most. So that's why I put a big question mark on them, and until if one of those players that I mentioned can step up and be the guy that is going to be the reliable goal scorer, there's still a big question of who exactly is the main goal scorer for Montreal. Now, in terms of playmaker, I put Piatti, but that's assuming he won't leave. And if he does leave, I'm going to say Bojan is going to be the playmaker because he's currently playing in the spot that Piatti is playing in. And they expected him to be kind of the guy that will replace Piatti once Piatti decided to leave Montreal. MVP, again, I put Piatti, assuming he won't leave. But if he does leave, I would have also put another question mark in terms of MVP because, when you look at most of these players that the Impact has, there's definitely some good candidate of them potentially be the MVP of the team, but they're not really kind of right up to that level of being just as important as what Nacho Piatti is to this team. So, yeah, again, if Piatti does leave this team, it does leave me once again with a big question mark of who is going to be the main guy and who's going to be the MVP of this team. Surprise package, I put 4 names: Kyoto, Lappinainen, Urruti, and Bojan. And I put 4 of these names because, 4 of these guys can really be guys that can be not only stepping up in terms of the goal scoring department, but also on the assist department. And these 4 guys is also guys that I would also kind of explain why I put a big question mark in terms of the goals scored, and might put a question mark on the MVP list besides Piatti, because all 4 of these guys can definitely be a goal scoring of this team, but it doesn't seem like all 4 of these guys, like if I had to have one of these players to be the main goal scorer and one of these players that when Montreal does need a goal badly and need a reliable source, I can't really say I want to pick one of these guys as the go-to player to be the reliable source in terms of goal scoring. And the same can goes with the MVP role, where all 4 of these players can definitely be the MVP of these team if you not include Piatti in this team. But at the same time, it doesn't seem like all 4 of these players have that MVP caliber level and have that importance level where Montreal really needs this guy, or else they could be having some problem if he's not in the starting 11, or if he does get injured during the season. What I like about Montreal, well, they look pretty good on the wing and the midfield. I mean, when you look at Montreal in terms of the starting 11, I like the wing area of their starting 11 with Lapinainen and Okwanko, both very decent wingers, and now they add the addition of Kyoto, who we know how he was when he was with the Dynamo, and that he was part of that Kyoto and the Lee's kind of Honduran partnership on the wing that really kind of put a lot of fear into a lot of MLS opponent. Now, Kyoto, obviously last season he had a massive regress, and we don't know if he's going to be a regular starter of this team. Well, I don't think he's going to be a regular starter. I still think Okwanko and Lapinainen could be the regular starter of this team, and Kyoto might come off the bench. But if Kyoto wants to get some regular minutes for this team, then he better hope that he can recover that form that he had with Houston a couple of years ago, and not had the form that he had last season with the Dynamo. That kind of really got him out of that team. And in terms of the midfield itself, I also love the midfield they had with Piet and Sofia Taider, two very underrated holding midfield players that can do good things with this team. So yeah, they look pretty good on the wing and the midfield, and that seems to be a big strength of this team. The one big question obviously they have is what life could look like if Piatti leaves, and this of course goes back to me talking about if Piatti does leave, then what does Montreal do, and what does Montreal looks like if he does leave? And we kind of saw a little bit of that last season when Piatti was out for majority of the season, and there's time Montreal did look decent without Piatti, but in the second half of the season, especially once Piatti of course landed himself back on the IR, they started to fall apart, and that makes me very concerned about this team with the way that they try so much in terms of trying to address the issue of not having Nacho Piatti in this team, and trying to add in some attacking piece that can be in hold of his spot, and it didn't really look like it worked very well last season. So yeah, I mean, that is a huge question that the Impact will have to ask, and there's no doubt that if Piatti does leave this team, my hope of the Impact making the playoffs tremendously decline if Piatti stays with this team. I mean, the other issue that I also have, and the other big question I have with this Impact team, is whether or not if Thierry Henry can be a decent manager. And we know Thierry Henry was a decent player when he come to MLS, and well, in fact, he is considered one of the best striker in the world during his time when he was playing and coming to the Red Bulls. But we also know that he was one of the worst manager in the world when he decided to step into managerial role, and we saw what happened during his time at Monaco and how that kind of fall apart. Now he come to Montreal. Does that mean that he can revive his career? And then in some way, hiring Thierry Henry kind of reminds me a little bit of when Montreal decided to hire Remy Gard, where Remy Gard is another guy that kind of had his coaching reputation start to fall apart when he went to Aston Villa. They, of course, picked him up, and he was okay with Montreal. The problem is, okay didn't mean that they were going to be making the playoffs regularly, and hence, that's why they basically decided to fire him last season, and that they just could not be stuck in these mediocre kind of spot that they've been in the last two seasons. And I wonder, will Thierry Henry be the guy that will not only bring this team to the playoffs, but actually attract players, which I know this offseason there's been talk that, with Thierry Henry being the Impact manager, it could really attract some of the players from either in Europe or even in South America to play with him. Well, right now, when I look at the in list that they have right now, it doesn't seem like they attracted a lot of players, and that they've been very quiet in this offseason. And this team, I clearly think, needs to have some improvement in terms of the defense and maybe in terms of the attacking threat too, and they didn't do that this offseason. So that does also makes me very concerned that, Thierry Henry could end up in the same fate as what Remy Gard was, where he took a team that was very mediocre and aren't able to get it to the playoffs. But we shall see how the Impact season would do. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. If you're an Impact fan, what do you think of this list, and what do you think of your offseason acquisition and the player potentially is going to be out for your team? Who do you think is going to be the goal scorer, the playmaker, the MVP, and the surprise package? And also, what do you like about your team? And what is one big question you want this team to answer as the season is about to begin? But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.